The late afternoon sun filtered through the dense canopy of the ancient forest as a group of 5 friends made their way along a narrow, winding path. Laughter and excited chatter echoed through the trees, disturbing the usual stillness of the secluded woods. They were a diverse bunch bound by years of friendship and a shared love for adventure. Among them was Sarah, with her infectious smile and wild curly hair, often the heart and soul of their group. As they reached a clearing, they decided it was the perfect spot to set up camp. The clearing was unusually serene, encircled by towering old trees that seemed to watch over them like silent guardians. The sun, now a fiery orb dipping toward the horizon, cast a warm golden light over the scene. They quickly set to work, pitching tents and gathering firewood. Sarah joked about the possibility of encountering woodland spirits, her laughter light and carefree. The others joined in, playfully teasing each other about who would be the first to get scared at night. As dusk fell, a peculiar calm descended on the forest. The sounds of nature seemed to hush, as if in anticipation. The group, now gathered around a crackling fire, started sharing stories. Their tales began with humorous anecdotes, but soon shifted to local legends and ghost stories, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on their faces. The forest around them felt alive, every rustle and whisper of the wind stirring their imaginations. Sarah, peering into the darkening woods, thought she saw a shadow flit between the trees. She blinked, and it was gone. Must be the firelight playing tricks, she mused to herself, shrugging off the uneasy feeling. As the night deepened, an unspoken sense of unease began to creep into their hearts. They laughed a little less loudly, glanced over their shoulders a bit more often. The forest, with its dark silhouettes and unknown sounds, seemed to close in around them. Yet, they were reluctant to voice their fears, not wanting to admit that the stories might have gotten under their skin. The group eventually settled into their tents, the sounds of the forest a constant whispering backdrop. As they drifted off to sleep, a sense of something ancient and watchful seemed to hang in the air, the remnants of their laughter dying away into the chilling embrace of the woods. Unseen by the sleeping campers, faint glimmers of light began to dance among the trees. Ethereal and soundless, they moved with purpose, weaving between the trunks and over the sleeping forms. The symbols carved into the bark of the surrounding trees, unnoticed by the friends in their daytime arrival, glowed faintly under the touch of these ghostly lights. In her tent, Sarah stirred restlessly, a frown creasing her brow. Dreams, dark and incomprehensible, twisted through her mind. Whispers, barely audible, filled her ears, speaking in tongues long forgotten. Outside, the forest held its breath, waiting for dawn to reveal the secrets it had kept through the night. The first light of dawn broke through the dense foliage, casting a pale glow over the campsite. Birds chirped tentatively, as if wary of disturbing the heavy silence that lay over the area. The group, emerging from their tents, rubbed sleep from their eyes, the remnants of last night's eerie stories still lingering in their minds. As they began to prepare breakfast, a sense of normalcy started to return. The forest, now bathed in the gentle morning light, seemed less ominous than it had under the cover of darkness. That is, until they noticed something profoundly unsettling. "What's this?" Mark, one of the friends, asked, his voice laced with confusion. He was standing by a tree at the edge of their campsite, staring intently at something carved into the bark. The others gathered around, and a collective chill ran down their spines. Carved into the tree were symbols ancient and intricate. They were unlike anything they had seen before, a series of interlocking patterns that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. The symbols were etched deeply into the wood, as if done with great purpose and force. "Maybe it's just some local kids messing around," Emily suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. But they look so old, like they've been here for ages, Sarah's brother Josh added, his brow furrowed in concern. As they inspected the other trees surrounding their campsite, they found similar carvings on nearly every one. A sense of dread began to settle over the group. These were no random acts of vandalism. They felt intentional, almost ritualistic. It was then that they realized something even more alarming. "Where's Sarah?" Emily asked, a note of panic creeping into her voice. They quickly checked her tent, finding it empty, her sleeping bag undisturbed. Her backpack and phone were still there, as if she had vanished into thin air. Panic set in as they called out her name, their voices echoing through the trees. But there was no response, only the eerie silence of the forest, punctuated by the occasional whisper of the wind. Determined to find Sarah, they split up, each taking different directions, shouting her name and searching through the dense underbrush. The forest seemed to grow thicker and darker as they searched, the once familiar paths twisting into confusing mazes as they delved deeper. A sense of being watched crept over them. Shadows seemed to flicker at the corner of their vision, and the whispers in the woods grew louder. Now interspersed with chilling laughter and faint cries for help, the sounds seemed to lead them in circles. Mark, venturing further than the others, stumbled upon a small clearing. In its center stood a solitary tree, its bark covered entirely with the same ancient symbols but more elaborate, more menacing. The air around it felt colder, charged with an unseen energy. He reached out to touch the carvings, only to pull back as a jolt of fear surged through him. As night approached with no sign of Sarah, the group, weary and frightened, reluctantly returned to their campsite. That night was restless, filled with strange sounds and the unnerving feeling of being watched. Huddled around the dying fire, they debated leaving, but were torn by the thought of abandoning their friend. The forest, with its whispering trees and enigmatic symbols, held onto its secrets, the darkness of the night enveloping them in a shroud of mystery and fear. In the dim light of early morning, the forest seemed a different world, one veiled in mist and mystery. The group, their faces etched with worry, split into smaller parties, each driven by a mix of fear and determination to find Sarah. Mark and Emily, choosing the western trail, ventured into an increasingly dense part of the forest. The trees here were old and gnarled, their branches twisted into sinister shapes. A child's laughter, clear yet haunting, broke the heavy silence echoing through the trees. It was a sound both beautiful and terrifying, drawing them deeper into the woods. They found themselves in a small glade, where the sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy. There, amidst the dappled light, appeared the fleeting image of a young girl. Her features were blurred, her presence ghostly. She beckoned with a small, pale hand before dissolving into the shadows. The deeper they went in pursuit, the more the forest seemed to twist and contort around them. Paths disappeared, trees bent unnaturally, and the once familiar landscape turned alien and menacing. Meanwhile, Josh, taking the path to the east, came upon a cabin hidden among overgrown vines and underbrush. Its neglected state suggested years of abandonment, a forgotten relic in the heart of the forest. The door groaned as he pushed it open, revealing a scene that sent a shiver down his spine. Inside, the cabin was filled with statues. They were eerily lifelike, each figure frozen in an expression of terror. Among them was one that bore a striking resemblance to Sarah, her face etched with a silent scream of horror. The sight rooted Josh to the spot, a cold fear clutching at his heart. In the south, Alice walked a path that seemed to weave and flow like a river. The trees here were cloaked in a perpetual twilight, their leaves whispering secrets in a language long forgotten. The whispers grew louder, morphing into voices that spoke directly to her soul. They dredged up memories she had locked away. Speaking of fears she dared not face, she came upon a clearing where the light was otherworldly. casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. Figures moved within the mist, their forms shifting and writhing in silent agony. Among these tormented souls, Alice thought she saw Sarah, her face a mask of pain before she faded away like smoke on the wind. When evening drew near, they regrouped at the campsite, each person pale and shaken. Their stories, told in hushed, trembling voices, painted a picture of a forest not just alive, but sentient, an entity that played with their minds and fed on their fears. As darkness fell, a sense of impending doom settled over them. Sarah's disappearance had become more than a mere missing person case. It was now a struggle for survival against the dark heart of the woods. Under the cloak of twilight, the forest shifted into a realm of shadow and mystery. The campfire flickered feebly against the encroaching darkness, its light casting ghostly shapes on the weary faces of the friends huddled around it. The comforting sounds of nocturnal life were conspicuously absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to weigh heavily on the air. In this eerie quiet, every small noise was amplified. A twig snapping, the rustle of leaves, sending jolts of fear through the group. Their eyes darted to the forest's edge, half expecting to see something emerge from the darkness. As the night deepened, a thick, cold fog crept through the trees, swirling around their campsite. It felt almost sentient, as if the forest itself were drawing a veil, isolating them from the world. The fire's glow battled against this mist, but its efforts were in vain. The shadows cast by the flames took on a life of their own, contorting and twisting into grotesque figures that danced just beyond the light's reach. Within the heart of this mist, whispers began to emerge. At first, they were indistinct, a soft murmur, like the wind through leaves. But slowly they grew louder, clearer, forming into discernible words that seemed to echo from the very fog itself. These whispers were intimate, speaking of past regrets, long-buried desires, and deep-seated fears, each syllable a piercing reminder of moments they wished to forget. Among these spectral voices, one stood out, a voice filled with pain and desperation, unmistakably Sarah's. It called out for help, the words twisting in the night air, full of anguish. The group strained to locate the source, but Sarah's voice was elusive, shifting with the fog, always just out of reach, leading them in a futile chase through the mist. As their eyes adjusted to the dimness, they began to notice figures in the fog. These were no mere tricks of light and shadow. They were distinct humanoid shapes, but distorted, as if made from the mist itself. Every attempt to focus on these figures was met with frustration, as they seemed to dissolve upon scrutiny, only to reappear elsewhere, their presence a constant, unnerving watchfulness. Throughout the long, harrowing night, the group was tormented by the sensation of being observed by unseen eyes, the whispers gnawing at their sanity. Torn between terror and exhaustion, they faced an impossible choice: venture into the fog in search of Sarah, or remain in the questionable safety of their campsite. The forest, shrouded in mist and mystery, had ensnared them, a predator playing a cruel game with its prey. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the fog, the forest revealed itself once more, altered in a way that was imperceptible, yet undeniable. The night's ordeal had left its mark on the group, their faces drawn and eyes haunted. They knew, with a dreadful certainty, that the day would bring new terrors. The forest and the whispers within had promised as much. Dawn's early light cast a fragile peace over the forest, but the group, huddled together in the clearing, felt anything but peace. The shadows of the previous night's terror still clung to them like cobwebs as they prepared to continue their search for Sarah. As they moved to break camp, Mark paused, his gaze fixed on something at the base of a nearby tree. Intricately carved symbols, fresh and stark against the ancient bark, drew them closer. These symbols, reminiscent yet distinct from the ones they had found earlier, seemed to beckon them deeper into the forest. With a mix of apprehension and resolve, they decided to follow this new trail of carvings, each step taking them further from the familiar path and deeper into the unknown. The symbols led them through a thicket that scratched at their skin and snagged their clothes, as if the forest itself was trying to hold them back. The air grew colder, denser as they ventured deeper, and the sense of foreboding that hung in the air was almost tangible, pressing down on them with an almost physical weight. Eventually, the path brought them to a small, secluded clearing. In its heart lay a half-concealed entrance to what appeared to be an underground chamber. The mouth of the cave yawned open like a portal to another world, inviting yet ominous. With a collective breath to steel their nerves, they descended into the earth, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness, revealing a world untouched by time. The chamber they found themselves in was vast, its walls etched with the same intricate symbols that had led them here. The air was cool and stagnant, filled with the weight of unspoken histories. Scattered across the floor were artifacts, each one a relic whispering tales of a time long forgotten. The walls bore drawings that depicted scenes of ritualistic ceremonies and celestial events, each image meticulously crafted, a testament to a people and a purpose lost to time. The light from their flashlights cast strange shadows, making the figures in the drawings seem to move in a silent dance. As they delved deeper into the chamber, a palpable energy began to pulse through the air. They started to experience fleeting visions, shadowy glimpses of figures draped in ceremonial attire, gathered around the symbols in what appeared to be ancient rituals. Among these spectral figures, one stood out with heart-stopping clarity. A woman who bore a striking resemblance to Sarah. She was central to the rituals, a pivotal figure in these ghostly reenactments. A chilling realization washed over them. Sarah's disappearance was entwined with these long-forgotten rituals. The symbols, the chamber, the visions, they all pointed to a history that was inexplicably linked to their friend. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, they scoured the chamber for more clues, but with each new discovery, they felt themselves sinking deeper into a mystery that straddled the boundary between the past and the present, the earthly and the unearthly. As they emerged back into the light of the dying day, the forest around them seemed to have shifted, as if it were alive and aware of their newfound knowledge. The search for Sarah had become more than a rescue mission. It was a journey into the heart of a mystery that was as ancient as the forest itself. And as the light faded, so too did the last vestiges of their once steady grip on reality. Weighed down by the revelations from the underground chamber, the group trudged out of the forest, each step feeling heavier than the last. The once familiar woods now watched them with a knowing gaze, its trees standing like silent sentinels to their troubled thoughts. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and crimson, they made a unanimous, albeit reluctant, decision. It was time to return to the city, to seek help, and to confront the unsettling connection between Sarah and the ancient mysteries they had uncovered. The forest, on their return trek, seemed transformed. Shadows stretched unnaturally, almost reaching out to them, and the air was heavy, as if charged with a silent warning. Their intrusion into the chamber's secrets had not gone unnoticed, and the forest felt alive with a quiet resentment. Every sound, the crack of a twig, the whisper of the wind through the leaves, seemed amplified, heightening their anxiety. The forest, having revealed a fragment of its enigma, seemed eager to usher them out, hastening their steps back to the world they knew. Stepping out of the woods and into the city was a surreal experience. The normalcy of urban life clashed starkly with the haunting mysteries they had just left behind. Surrounded by the hustle and bustle of city life, they felt like specters out of place and time, burdened with knowledge that felt both incredible and terrifying. With heavy hearts, they made their way to Sarah's house, the questions about her involvement with the forest secret burning in their minds. The door to Sarah's house swung open, and there she stood, unharmed and bewildered. She listened to their tale with growing disbelief, her confusion turning to denial. She claimed she had never been on the trip, insisting she had been in the city the entire time. Her words, so firm and sincere, struck them like a physical blow. Stunned, the group left Sarah's house in a daze, their memories of her laughing around the campfire, her presence as real as any of theirs, clashed violently with the reality they were now faced with. Doubt, like a creeping vine, began to insinuate itself into their thoughts. Had they imagined Sarah's presence in the woods? Were the artifacts and visions merely hallucinations, born from their collective psyche? Or was there something more at play, something that defied explanation, straddling the line between the natural and the supernatural? As night fell over the city, their homes offered no refuge from the haunting whispers of the forest. In their dreams, Sarah's face flickered. One moment, the friend who denied ever joining them; the next, the central figure of their haunting visions. The truth remained elusive, hidden within the depths of the whispering woods, and they knew, with a sense of inevitable dread, that their journey was far from over. The night following their return from the whispering woods was a tapestry of haunting dreams and restless thoughts for the group. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, they found themselves drawn back to Sarah's house, a collective need for answers gnawing at their minds. The morning air was unusually still as they approached Sarah's home. The neighborhood lay in a hushed silence, the quiet almost oppressive. With each ring of the doorbell that went unanswered, their hearts sank a little more. Calls to Sarah's phone echoed into the void of unanswered calls, deepening the mystery. Then Mark, his gaze wandering in the uneasy wait, froze. There, etched into the wood of Sarah's doorframe, were the symbols, unmistakable and ominous. The same intricate patterns they had seen carved into the trees of the forest. The revelation struck them like a physical blow, a chilling connection that defied logic and reason. How had these symbols, a haunting reminder of their ordeal in the woods, found their way here to Sarah's doorstep in the heart of the city? The lines between the tangible world and the enigmatic forces they had encountered in the forest blurred alarmingly. Questions swirled in a maelstrom of doubt and fear. Was the Sarah they knew ever truly with them, or was she an ethereal tie to the ancient curse of the forest? What were these symbols, and why were they here in her home, miles away from their origin? As they stood there, the weight of the unsolved mystery pressing down on them, they realized that the forest's reach extended beyond its physical confines. The whispering woods, with their shadows and secrets, had woven themselves into the fabric of their reality.